front, or near the front. And if you didn't have so much money, you were in the back, further away from the pulpit. Nicely carved box pews, none of this ornamental work in the ceiling, very plain. Whitewash, no stained glass windows. They didn't believe in that. That was popish. That was Catholic. You wouldn't do that. No candles. Remember, this is except for lighting purposes. Now, this building, like the Reformed Church, Hill Church, were very similar in their construction. But then the Victorian era came along, and religious practices are changing. The Covenanters, of course, aren't. They won't sing hymns. They're still lining out the tunes. But the mainstream Presbyterians are going to hymns. And they've changed the sanctuary. They go to more comfortable pews, not too much different from the ones that are here now. They get rid of the wine glass pulpit and they move the front of the sanctuary here, where they have carved furniture in keeping with the period, and of course a communion table, not this one, but an earlier one up front, and a lectern, Gothic lectern for delivering the Word of God, but not really elevated much higher than the floor. And that's in 1850, and they go from double doors on the side to double doors back there. And you can see them stoned in. They're still there, even though they're not used anymore.
And Walt, I brought the picture on the way out there and see it.
Oh, yes.
From 1790, or
1890, yes, thank you. And that, of course, in 1890, there's some other changes that take place. 1850, just before the Civil War, other changes to this room sanctuary in 1890 and again in 1912. But to move along quickly, the Battle of Gettysburg. This congregation, Lower Marsh Creek, has a number of men in the Army of the Potomac or serving in the Union Army, both away and who were here actually during the Gettysburg campaign. The building is right along the Fairfield Road, which saw a great deal of activity. Of course, Fairfield had a cavalry battle right after the Battle of Gettysburg, a big one, a few days after the fighting here, as Lee's army was retreating. And this road saw constant movement, first by Confederates, then later by Union forces in pursuit. This building and the adjacent farms, the David Stewart Farm and others, became field hospitals. We know this sanctuary was a field hospital. Wounded from both sides were cared for here. The pastor at the time was the Reverend John Riddle Warner. And he actually came from a Reformed tradition. He'd gone to Pittsburgh Theological Seminary. And he was called to be the pastor of the Hill Reformed congregation, but was then called to be the pastor of this church and Great Conewago in Hunterstown, dual pastorate, 2 congregations. He left Hill Church, and most of his congregation followed him, and they joined us. Doctrinally, they didn't have much opposition, apparently, anymore. There wasn't much of a distinction, or apparently they were not that concerned with it, and that congregation rapidly dwindled, though it hung on for a few more years. Reverend John Riddle Warner was here for 10 years, and he was enormously popular, a beloved pastor. He was pastor at the time of the Battle of Gettysburg. The house that he lived in, the manse, was actually a rented house in Gettysburg, the town, the borough. He watched the battle from the upper floor of the building. His wife stayed with relatives up in Shippensburg. She had just had a child, and in fact, got very, very sick, and he was deeply worried about her. And she died of complications from mastitis that fall. He lost his wife. She had a young child that he would raise as a single parent. What reason I tell you all this is Reverend John Riddle Warner became Gettysburg's most famous and most demanded battlefield guide. He gave a tour to members of Congress in 1864, here and in Washington. He was often in demand for his services to conduct tours. He gave several patriotic addresses on the battlefield. And in 1867, he was called to a church in St. Louis, Missouri, and he left here. He was only here 10 years, and this congregation was deeply distraught at his decision to leave. But I think it had a lot to do with the fact that this place had too many memories. He lost his wife, deeply attached to her. I think he just needed to get out, to be honest. And although he would come back to visit on occasion. And we had a succession of pastors then after the Civil War, including the Reverend William Van Cleve, who was here for quite a while. To jump ahead now very rapidly, after the Civil War, the church underwent changes in 1890, and Reverend Williams mentioned a portrait that was taken of the congregation in front of the sanctuary. And in 1912, all of this ceiling work was installed. The stained glass windows were installed. The church was brought up again into the popular Victorian standards of the day. And indeed, the pulpit furniture dates from the 1890s. This almost East Lake style furniture that we have came then. Now, after 1912, there weren't too many.
So now I'm asking Lorraine to play the Ashokan Farewell, which is actually a fairly recently composed song, but it became very much associated with the Civil War in the Ken Burns Civil War series on public television. So it tends to be very closely associated with the Civil War. So let's hear Lorraine close out the Civil War for us. And since we're also Scottish, what's the one?
Okay, well, this is The Rakes of Mallow. Rake meaning a mischievous young man like his son Colin. How about a little percussion there?
And they must have done some dancing sometime, somewhere, like a turkey in the straw type hoedown.
Put your hands together.
Now we want to switch periods again and go to the Revolutionary War period. William Billings is one of, if not preeminent, one of the very famous colonial composers, actually from New England. He was a buddy of Paul Revere and Sam Adams and the guy who the beer is named after, in fact.
Woohoo!
I play the
And had just tons to do with,
It's no
with
instrument, play the drum.
generating the first level of original American music in the area when they were singing masters. I mean, these singing masters would go around, they'd compose their own songs and write their own songbooks, and go around and set up singing schools and sell their books. That's kind of how they made their living. And one of the songs he did became extremely popular during the Revolutionary War. It's called Chester. And it almost became, this is on page 12 in the book, it almost became what we would call the fight song of the Revolutionary War. It's kind of hymn, but kind of fight. So we're going to render that one. This is like imagine colonial soldiers marching along, trudging along, or maybe sitting around the campfire. So let's be around the campfire.
Everybody on verse one?
Yeah.
3, 4. Let tyrants shake their iron rod, and slavery clank her galling chains. We fear them not, we trust in God. New England's God forever reigns.
Howe and Burgoyne and Clinton too, with Prescott and Cornwallis join, together plot our overthrow in one infernal league combined.
When God inspired us for the fight, their ranks were broke, her lines were forced, their ships were shattered in our sight, or swiftly driven from our coast.
Oh, comes on with haughty stride, our troops advance with martial noise. Let their veterans before our youth, and the generals yield to beardless boys. Everybody, with grateful offering shall we bring? What shall we render to the Lord? Loud hallelujahs let us sing, and praise his name on every chord.
Bravo! Yay! Yay!
That would be the fight song of the Revolution.
No song more popular at this time than Chester.
And everybody knows Yankee Doodle. So let's go to page 13. And
You want
everybody,
Marilyn to do the
sure,
background?
absolutely. And everybody join in where you want to, okay?
Ready, go!
Father and I went down to camp along with Captain Gooding, and there we saw the men and boys as thick as hasty pudding. Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle dandy. Mind the music and the step, and with the girls be handy. There was Captain Washington upon a slapping stallion, giving orders to his men. I guess there was a million. Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle dandy. Mind the music and the step, and with the girls be handy. And then the feathers on his hat, they looked so tarnal fine. I wanted Parkerly to get to give to my Jemima. Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle dandy. Mind the music and the step, and with the girls be handy.
And then we saw a swamping gun as large as log of maple, a long and deuced little cart to load for father's cattle.
Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle dandy. Mind the music and the step, and with the girls be handy. And every time they shoot it off, it takes a horn of powder. It makes a noise like father's gun, only a nation louder. Yankee Doodle, keep it up,
Come on, clap your
Yankee Doodle
hands.
dandy. Mind the music and the step, and with the girls be handy.
When it is nigh on woman with self-desire is underpinning, and father went as nigh again, I thought the deuce was in him.
Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle dandy. Mind the music and the step, and with the girls be handy. We saw a little barrel too, the heads were made of leather. They knocked upon it little clubs and called the folks together. Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle dandy. Mind the music and the step, and with the girls be handy.
And there they'd fife away like fun and play on cornstalk fiddles, and some had ribbons in their blood all bound around their middles.
Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle dandy. Mind the music and the step, and with the girls be handy. The troopers too would gallop up and fire right in our faces. It scared me almost to death to see them run such races. Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle dandy. Mind the music and the step, and with the girls be handy.
Uncle Sam came there to change some pack and onions for lasses' cakes to carry home to give his wife and young ones.
Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle dandy. Mind the music and the step, and with the girls be handy. But I can't tell of half I see, they kept at such a smother. So I took my hat off, made a bow, scampered home to mother.
Whoa!
Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle dandy. Mind the music and the step, and with the girls be handy.
Cousin Simon grew so bold I thought he would have cocked it. It scared me so I streaked it off and hung my father's pocket.
Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle dandy. Mind the music and the step, and with the girls be handy. And there I saw a pumpkin shell as big as mother's basin, and every time they touched it off they scampered like the nation. Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle dandy. Mind the music and the step, and with the girls be handy.
You think they did that in the Revolutionary time? I think so.
We did revolutionary to me.
We did it during the Depression time.
And when did they stick a feather in his cap? Call it macaroni, that's not in here.
That's the shortest version.
Ah, yeah, okay.
So David, it's yours.
Okay,
Do I have time for my
Oh,
presentation?
I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah. In virtue of Dale's need possibly to get away, I just want him to come up and stand by my side for 1 second. The Reverend Dale E. Williams is already a good friend,